Some unexpected cars from the 1970s are becoming the darlings of collectors. While not as flashy as a vintage Ferrari, these huge gas-guzzling sedans, land yachts from the age of disco, can still stop traffic and are still somewhat of a bargain in the world of vintage car collecting. Joining us now to discuss is WSJ reporter Jonathan Welsh. Jonathan, so great to see you.
Likewise.
So you suggest that these 1970s sedans might be a way for a novice collector to get his or her feet wet?
Right. They're still, they've never really taken off among collectors, at least not until now. They're showing some signs of it, but they're still very inexpensive. A lot of head-turning value for the dollar because, I mean, and if they charged by the pound, these would be the bargain of the century.
But of course, no one is buying these for fuel efficiency, right?
No, definitely not. In fact, what's interesting is that these were the top-of-the-line cars when they were new in the early 70s, but the gas crunch came along, and suddenly it was really unpopular to be driving around in something getting 6, 7, 8 miles per gallon.
You couldn't give them away at that point,
it's true.
right?
It was true. And so they quickly fell out of favor, and they've stayed that way for years and years among collectors as well, because, you know, they have 4 doors, they're seen as a little bit dowdy, you know, they're kind of squared off. I think 2-door coupes, convertibles, sports cars are always going to be more popular.
Well, let's dive into some of the top 5. Let's start with, who can forget, the iconic Cadillac Sedan DeVille.
Right. Well, I was looking through some of the old ads for this car, and some of the things they show seem really incongruous, you know, people leading these active lifestyles, skiing, you know, partying, and you think, how is that thing going to ever get to the slopes, you know, with the rear-wheel drive?
That is a boat. How much?
Enormous. One of the biggest cars.
Mint version of that car cost you now?
Oh, if you have $10,000 to $15,000 to spend really on just about any of these, the Cadillacs tend to be a little pricier.
Nice. I'm
interested to see, there's one of these being auctioned later this month. I can't wait to see what it fetches. That might set the tone.
Absolutely. And of course, then the DeVille's rival is the Continental, the Lincoln Continental, right?
Yeah, those two went head to head. They for decades, really. And
is this one going to fetch as much money as the DeVille?
We'll see. I found one that was beautiful. It was a mint condition one for about $16,000. But still, generally between 10 and 15, we'll find you a nice one. And I'm talking about original paint in those colors that you just don't find today.
Amazing.
They don't exist anymore.
Amazing. And then, of course, the slightly sinister Chrysler Imperial that has a cinematic pedigree, right?
Yeah, that's one that I have to admit to having a soft spot for. It's that wide grille, and they had what was cool at the time, the hidden headlights. So the grille flips up and exposes the headlights, but otherwise it looks kind of sinister. It's like a face without eyes.
And it famously was the car that Robert De Niro drove in Mean Streets.
Yeah, Robert De Niro and Harvey Keitel were partners in crime, as I recall.
I love
one of those. So the car, I don't know what was more intimidating, them or the car.
And the Mercury Marquis is another one that has a sort of a popular culture status.
Right. Well, you know, if you grew up in the 70s watching TV shows like Hawaii Five-0, Barnaby Jones, things like that, if anyone remembers those, the networks had a deal with Ford and Mercury back then. So a lot of the heroes on those shows, like Steve McGarrett from Hawaii Five-0, drove Mercury Marquis.
I love it. There's a real TV cop cred to that car, isn't there?
There is. And you know, when that show made a comeback a few years ago, the old car made a cameo appearance. It was the funniest thing.
Oh, that's great.
It drove the car people crazy.
That's so great. Then, of course, who can forget the wheels of J.R. Ewing on Dallas?
Yes, yeah. Well, it's interesting. The American brands were up against Mercedes, which was really emerging at the time. And I think JR gave the Mercedes more street cred than anyone else.
Now, this is, of course, a much pricier car than the other ones we've been talking about,
Right. It was at the time, and it still is now, although, you know, relatively speaking, it's inexpensive. It's roughly in the same price range. There are certain versions of it that fetch a little more.
So what will a mint version of that Mercedes cost?
The basic one, you know, a really, really nice one, somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. Perhaps less for one that's okay.
Right.
There's one version with a huge engine. They call it the 6.9. It's kind of a hot rod in disguise, and those, I've seen those for $30,000 or $40,000, at least the asking price.
Right. So much fun. Now, when do you think it's going to be time for 80s cars to fall into favor?
You know, just about everyone I spoke to, even some of the experts in the collector business, said that the 80s cars are starting to kind of get their toe in the door, and they all sound surprised about it. But I don't know. I think it might lead with some of the two-doors. I'm thinking of the Knight Rider Firebird, maybe.
You heard it here first
Yes,
from Jonathan
that's right.
Welsh. Thank you so much.
We're on top of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan.
A
Great
pleasure.
to see you.
Likewise.